Hi, class. Last time we talked about John Hosper's and the libertarian point of view. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Kai Nielson's article as an egalitarian or a socialist. I want to start by bringing back Hosper's island analogy and giving some critiques of it that will lead to sort of this egalitarian perspective. So Hosper tells the story of the island, person A, person B. Person A works hard, plants the seeds, gets the food. Winter comes, he's prepared. Person B lazes around, winter comes, he's not prepared. Person B then goes to person A and says, I have a right to some of your food. Hosper says there is no right and no obligation to help the poor. If he wants to, it would be out of charity. Now, Hosper tells this analogy as a way of saying this is representative of our current situation. But he gets criticized because people argue his island analogy makes certain assumptions that are false, right? So one of the things the island example assumes is that both sides of the island, as it gets divided, person A on one side, person B on another side, both sides of the island are equally fertile for growing crops. Each side of the island gets equal rain, equally good soil. And then you've just got one person working and the other person being lazy. But what if they divided the island and person A has a very fertile part of the island where he is, the great soil, takes the seeds, grows things, and person B gets a side of the island that's rocky and the soil doesn't go very deep and it doesn't take seeds very well and he works and works and nothing grows. Now does person A have an obligation to help person B? Does person B have a right to some of A's food? They divided the island, but it was completely unfair, right? Rocky versus good soil. Many people say, well, now person B does have, he worked, he tried, but his side of the island just won't grow food. So he has a right to some of A's stuff now, and A has an obligation to help. If that's true, if you agree with that, the argument is, well, isn't this our situation? Some people are born to parents where they will inherit millions of dollars. They will inherit a family that doesn't say, are you going to college, but where are you going? And the expectation is that you'll go, and we have the money to pay for you to go to college. Other people are born to crack-a-dick parents and foster care, poverty, failing schools, malnutrition. In our country, it's common, right? Especially in inner cities. Well, these people were not born into equal situations. One side of the island is really fertile and one side is really rocky. So doesn't the fertile side have an obligation to help the rocky side? It's of no fault of their own. And because of inheritance rights, I can be a millionaire at birth, a billionaire at birth. I can start my own company, and I can start 5 companies. If they all fail, who cares? Of course I can risk. Mom and Dad will just float the bill. I'll be Paris Hilton. I'll just start my own perfume line. If it smells like crap and no one buys it, oh well, Mom and Dad can absorb that loss. I've got to trust. Other people don't get to just start their own clothing line or whatever and see if it fails because they can barely get a high school education because it's infested with gangs and violence and poverty. Isn't there an obligation to help now, right? So maybe that island has a false assumption that both sides are equally fertile. Another assumption made by the island is that both person A and person B are equally capable of work. What if person B is disabled? What if person B is hurt while working? What if person B is elderly? What if person B is a child? Imagine a child on the island. Does the child have a right to some of A's food now? I think a lot of us would say yes. What if the person is 85 years old and can't work? Do they have a right to some of A's food now? What if they're in a wheelchair and they're disabled? If you say yes, then they say, well, we have the elderly and children and the disabled in our communities, and so we've got to provide for them through taxing and other things. We've got to have programs for them because there's an obligation to care for them that can't care for themselves. So the island analogy, again, seems to be faulty. Don't we need to care for those who were born in rocky soil, right? If you follow that analogy. Those that can't work for one reason or another. Another faulty assumption made by Hosper's island analogy is that person A represents the wealthy, hardworking, industrious. They're prepared for the winter. Person B represents the poor. Well, the analogy seems to indicate that all rich people are hardworking and all poor people are lazy, right? But we know lots of rich people that are lazy. I mentioned Paris Hilton. There are lots of people who get rich from not doing much at all, right? They happen to be really fast or really tall or something. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're a hard worker. No one would accuse Shaquille O'Neal of being a hard worker or something. He was known for being lazy and not getting the most out of his talents. So we know that not all rich people are hardworking, and we know that all poor people are not lazy. There are people that are working 2 minimum wage jobs, 16 hours a day to try to pay the bills. They're doing everything they can to make ends meet, and they're still not able to do it. So the analogy doesn't hold. It's clear that person B, if they're lazy, has no right to person A's food. But what if person B worked as hard as they could and still ended up poor? Now does person A have an obligation to help person B? If so, then maybe we have an obligation to help the working poor, those that are trying to work hard and just can't get ahead. And so as we begin to think about these things, you start to go, well, maybe we do need to have social programs for these people, for these individuals, because we don't start from equal footing, right? We don't have equal opportunity, and I think that's the key. If we had equal opportunity to succeed, then it's just a matter of hard work. But if there's not an equal opportunity to succeed, then maybe something needs to be done to make things more fair. And if some people are born rich and some people are born addicted to crack, there's not an equality of opportunity. Some can afford to get paid for private schools, tutoring, college, everything else. Another person, none of that, failing school. There's not an equality of opportunity. So what do? How do we even the score? We see this with the poverty rates related to race. 25% of African Americans are below the poverty line. Only 8% of Caucasians. It seems that there are social structures that create this. In the past, we know that there's been slavery, discrimination, no right to vote. By the time in the 1960s we get civil rights, almost every major corporation is owned by white people already. So how is this fair? And then there's an inheritance that kicks in. So it's like we have a competitive game, capitalism. We're competing. But we're playing basketball, and the other team, we put shackles on them and said, now try to beat us at basketball. And we build up a lead. We're up 200-7. And now we're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't fair. Here, we'll take the shackles off. But we're still playing a competitive game where we're up 200 points, right? How do we level that off? Do we need to create social structures through taxation or whatnot, programs, to create an equality of opportunity? We're not talking about equality of outcome at this point. That's socialism. Socialism says we want an equality of output. This is simply an equality of opportunity, that we can have a level playing field where we can all compete. So these are some real problems, and people say the libertarian leads to this kind of injustice. The libertarian endorses this kind of injustice, inequality, and something else needs to be done, right? So Kai Nielsen, this is again the extreme. This is the egalitarian. Democrats are like really watered down versions economically of the egalitarian. The goal of Hosper's, the libertarian, was to increase freedom, right? Nielsen wants to increase equality. Now, normally, freedom and equality are at odds with each other economically. You can think of it like a grid, right? Freedom down the vertical, equality down the horizontal. As you increase freedom economically, you decrease equality. If you take the regulations from the government off, you stop taxing, redistributing wealth, and you increase freedom, you're going to get a lot of money into the hands of a few. We already see this in our current capitalistic system, right? Increase freedom, decrease equality. If you increase equality economically, you decrease freedom. Because to structure equality means you have to get your hands in, take money from these people, break up monopolies, control this. And to increase equality means we can't give you all the freedom you want to invest, own land, and get rich. So as you increase freedom, you tend to decrease equality. As you increase equality, you tend to decrease freedom. Hospers says increase freedom. Nielsen says increase equality. And then we've got this moral debate going on in the midst of it. Okay? We know that Nielsen focuses on positive rights because he believes that there needs to be an equality of the basic condition for everyone. So the first thing our society should do, since we have a lot of money, is to make sure everyone has clothing, shelter, food, education, healthcare, transportation. It's like 6 things. The equality of the basic condition. Everyone needs to have those things provided for them, right? Those are all positive rights. Healthcare, a house provided, food, etc., employment. These are positive rights that things have to be provided, so we know he focuses on those. Now, Nielsen also focuses on negative rights. The right to life, absolutely. No one should be able to murder you. The right to free speech, absolutely. The right to bear arms, potentially. I mean, Nielsen's not opposed to these negative rights, but in addition to what Hospers does, he brings in these positive rights as well. Something that is very different, though, Nielsen does not think you have an absolute right to property. So the libertarian says, I have an absolute right to property, it's a negative right, don't interfere, don't tax me. Nielsen says your right to property is not absolute and that the government can tax it and redistribute wealth for the betterment of the whole, for the betterment of society overall. Okay? So the right to property differs. One of Nielsen's key arguments morally is this. One person's wants should never come before another person's needs. Okay? This is on page 34 in the handout that you have. He says, I might have a desire for nice wine, fresh ripe mangoes, and sports cars, but if my foregoing those things is necessary in order to feed someone who's starving to death, then morality and decency require that I forego my wants to take care of someone else's needs. The rich should not get to buy their vacation home when a person on the other side of the tracks can't get educated or can't get a college degree or is having trouble eating. Your vacation home is a want. Their ability to get trained and educated is a need. Their needs come before your wants. And this is a hierarchy of goods. It's a moral argument. These goods, food, shelter, education, healthcare, come before these wants, nice wines, fresh ripe mangoes, etc. To reverse that is to be totally immoral. To watch someone starve while you're drinking up your $300 bottle of wine is unacceptable for Nielsen, morally. And society shouldn't stand for it. So the government should redistribute wealth that needs get taken care of first. After needs are taken care of, then we start taking care of wants as we can, right? He also says if we can't meet every need, the most stringent need gets met first. So if we can't provide psychological care for everyone, those people with the most severe psychological disabilities get provided for first. And then we expand out from there. Same with food. Same with shelter, whatever it might be. But his argument is there's so much wealth in the United States that we can provide everyone's need, no problem. In fact, we can meet most people's, not everyone, but most people's reasonable wants, right, if we redistributed. He also says we don't just distribute resources, we also distribute responsibilities. Responsibilities are divided equally amongst everyone capable of working. If you don't work, then you don't get your needs met. That's the socialist policy, right? Unless you're disabled, old, or a child, if you don't work, you don't get your needs provided for. So you've got to give your abilities and talents to the community in order to receive the benefits. This is a whole different way of restructuring your economic system. Instead of saying the individual is primary and individual rights are primary, what you're saying is the community is primary. Society as a whole is what matters. I'm here to cultivate my talents as a doctor, nurse, lawyer, janitor, food service operator, that I might give those gifts back to society. I'm not here to get rich. I'm not here just to help my family out. I'm not here just to think about me. I'm here to give my gifts to participate in making society better for the whole. As a result, I will have my basic needs met and most of my wants met, right? But I won't get rich because I'm not here for my selfish desires. I have to be motivated by cooperation, not competition. And in fact, socialists will just say it. Socialism will never work if individuals are motivated by selfishness and greed. Instead, we have to become motivated by cooperation and by a community-first attitude. And then we'll be motivated to become doctors, not because doctors are rich, because doctors save lives, give the greatest gift back to their communities. And if that's what motivated us, we wouldn't need money the way we do now. So responsibilities are divided just like resources are divided. Okay? And they want to catch freeloaders just like anybody else, so that freeloaders, if they're not working, won't receive the benefits. Excuse me. For Nielsen, his arguments are more utilitarian. I'm sorry, I want to go back here. Barack Obama said something related to this notion. Democrats feel this way quite a bit. Barack Obama talked about how he got a lot of pushback from this, saying, you didn't build that business yourself. You own your business, great. You didn't do that on your own. People were like, what are you talking about? Of course, this is my small business. I did this. His point was much like this notion of community first, that you couldn't get a loan if you didn't have banks. And banks wouldn't exist unless you had a lot of people investing money in banks. And you couldn't build your building without construction workers. And you couldn't be educated without universities and high schools and teachers. We don't succeed unless we do it together. No one succeeds alone. So Democrats are constantly pushing this notion that we have to work cooperatively together. And that means redistributing wealth to help those less fortunate, to help the elderly, to provide some health care. Because when we do this, we all succeed together. Republicans tend to be more individualistic. Don't stay out of my business, give me freedom, and let me be creative, entrepreneurial, and do what I want with my money and with my business, right? So one is like more butting the nose into saying, no, we're a community, we do this together. The other is more private, more about non-interference. And so you can see the differences in our current political system, right, in terms of how this works. Nielsen's argument is very utilitarian, almost exclusively. Redistributing wealth will hurt. Just like Barack Obama, right? The top 2%, they're going to be hurt. Their freedom will be minimized. Their wealth will come down. A lot of their wants won't be met. But you will make life better for 98%, right? Even if you change the statistics, even if you said the top 20% will be hurt, the bottom 80% will be benefited. The utilitarian says that leads to a society's flourishing. Because remember, the utilitarian wants the greatest good for the greatest number, right? So that an economic plan that says top 2% gets tax increases to help balance the budget and provide benefits to the rest, that's a utilitarian argument, through and through, right? So I want you to be able to hear that. After you leave this class, I want you to be able to hear those arguments and be able to identify them. So Nielsen says, not only do I think that this will benefit the majority because of my egalitarian outcomes, because these are about consequences, right? It's not about principles, it's about how do I get the results. If we tax and redistribute wealth, we'll get the results we're looking for and that we think are moral, namely equality. But he says, not only do I think I'll increase equality, Nielsen says, I'll actually increase freedom. This is like a head scratcher at first. How could a socialistic system that gears towards equality actually increase freedom? Here's Nielsen's argument. I don't know if you're going to agree with it or not. It's on page 37 and 38. But here's the argument, and this is vital. The libertarian views freedom as a negative right. I'm free as long as no one interferes with me, right? Negative right. But the egalitarian and even Democrat, I think that's true of Republicans too, by the way, that freedom is a negative right. We're free as long as no one interferes. I think Democrats and egalitarians, when they say the word freedom, they mean it as a positive right. People are not truly free if they're a slave to a low-paying job without minimum wage, if they're running around with no health care and they're in debt because they went to the ER. You're not really free if you have no education. You have no real job opportunities unless things are provided, like education and transportation to school and other things. That you're a slave to your circumstances unless you've got a freedom to escape. But the freedom to escape requires that certain things be provided to you first, right? You're not free as an elderly person unless you've got some Social Security and Medicaid and some security. So one group looks at freedom as a negative right, don't interfere. The other group looks at freedom as a positive right, something has to be provided. So Nielson actually says, by taking a little bit of freedom away from the rich, redistributing that, we're going to increase freedom, opportunity, the number of things and choices available to the poor. We're going to increase that and maximize freedom overall. So we're increasing equality and, he says, we're increasing freedom. A very interesting argument. Again, I'm not sure you agree or disagree, but again, I think it's worth thinking about. Is freedom a negative right, or is freedom a positive right? If the island analogy, if we put person B on a rocky part of the island and say, go plant your crops, are they really free to grow crops? Do they have any freedom at all? Doesn't good, fertile land have to be provided to person B, that they even have the freedom at all to feed themselves? Maybe this is true in our societies. Maybe freedom is not just about non-interference, government get out of our lives, but maybe there's a necessity to provide certain things for people that they might be free and increase and maximize their freedom. And this is Nielson's argument here. So I hope you're seeing the contrast. Cooperation versus competition. Individual first versus society first. Negative rights versus positive rights. Freedom versus equality. Both are making moral arguments. One a deontological argument, the other a utilitarian argument. I'm curious about your thoughts. It's possible that you're a deontologist and disagree with Hosper's. So if you like deontology, you don't necessarily have to agree with Hosper's. Remember, these moral theories like deontology do not equal a set of conclusions. It's just a way of reasoning through a moral problem. Same with utilitarianism. You can be a utilitarian and not necessarily agree with Nielson, right? I can hear a utilitarian saying, we've tried socialism and it fails, and countries turn out worse. The thing that actually helps people flourish more than anything else is capitalism. And we see the results historically and in different cultures. The poor are better off in the United States than the poor in any other country because of capitalism. So I can hear a utilitarian. So again, you can be a utilitarian and not agree with Nielson, okay? It's just a way of reasoning. It's not a set of conclusions. I hope this helps. A key quote from Nielson, this comes from Karl Marx. This is about how you distribute responsibilities and resources from each according to their ability, give it back to the community, to each according to their need, how it should be distributed. No one's need becomes before, no one's wants come before another person's needs. All right, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you online.